Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yugioh Everything, and welcome back to another Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh video. This is episode 8 of Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh, the podcast that I do with my friend Rarity Fangirl, where we take a deep dive into a particular piece of Yu-Gi-Oh media, and we just basically talk about that, usually on a more positive perspective, as this is the Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh podcast. If we ever decide to do not Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh, we'll let you know. But this channel is more based on the the positives than the negatives. And in this video, it'll be a fun one. We are taking on our first non-original series related project, and we are doing the Yu-Gi-Oh GX anime. So we're moving on from DM, the mangas, the dub shows, the movies, the R manga, all that good stuff. And we are moving on to the first spin-off show, which was Yu-Gi-Oh GX. And we are going to be talking about the subbed version of this anime. I believe we are going to do a video for the dub of GX and a video for the GX manga as well. But those will be in future installments. And I am very excited not only to bring on Rarity Fangirl, of course she's part of it, but to bring on our first guest, which is my good friend JC. You might know him as Legendary Duels. Rarity, I'll start with you real quick. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Hello, friends. I'm very excited to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, the sequel, in quotations, we'll talk about a little bit more later, to Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, and it was the third Yu-Gi-Oh! I ever got to see, so I'm really excited to talk about it. It's a very fun show, so I'm excited to talk about it also with our special guest. I'm so excited. We're gonna have more guests in the future, guys, so I'm just really happy we could have more people to bring on what they appreciate about the shows, so this is awesome. And thank you again for having me, as always, Dylan.
Of course, yeah, and I will link Rarity's channels down below. She's done some and continues to do some really cool projects, Yu-Gi-Oh! Related as well. And then the man, the myth, the legend. Listen, if you've been on my channel for a very long time, you know this man. He has appeared many times, whether it's been Jump Festa, podcasts, thumbnails for episode reviews, recently editing videos. He's a very good friend of mine, JC, Legendary Duels. How are you doing today, man?
Hey man, yeah dude, I am doing fantastic. I'm excited to be doing this. I'm glad that you guys invited me as a guest. It's going to be fun talking about GX, a little flash, a flash from the past. Is that how they say it? Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have a lot to say about GX. It's very close to me, so I can't wait to hop into it. But yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about some GX with everyone, and yeah, just share my love and passion for that show.
Yeah, of course, man. Well, that's what we want to bring on, people that really love the topic at hand that we are talking about. So, Rarity, it was Rarity's idea, and I loved it, so it was a great suggestion. Thank you, of course, for joining me. And yeah, let's get to it, man. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, the obviously first spin-off manga. I'm sorry, first spin-off series. Technically, it was the first spin-off manga as well, but the first spin-off series, which, yeah, does kind of act, as Rarity said earlier, as a quote-unquote sequel to Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Follows Jaden, Judai, our main protagonist. 180 episodes. It's the longest Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-off series in terms of episodes. And Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is a real interesting one. It's one of those shows that will always have a special place in my heart, because it was the first show that actually got me to watch subbed anime, and I have since kind of fallen in love with subbed anime. When I was about 15, 16 years old, I think it was kind of when like 5Ds was airing, and I realized that like the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX dub ended on a weird spot, and this is when internet was like first being a thing, 2010, 2011. It wasn't as necessarily like easy and frequently accessed by teens back then as it is, I would say, in today's day and age. And I looked back and I learned that Yu-Gi-Oh! GX had a whole 4th season that had not been dubbed, and I was like, what? And I went back and I watched not only season 4 subbed, but then I went back and watched the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime subbed. So GX sub was actually my first subbed animated series, which is really cool, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the sub stylings of the show. I fell in love with just like Japanese anime with Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and really loved season 3 and of course season 4. And I think my favorite element of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is its main protagonist, Judai. Now, I've seen mixed things about Judai, although most of the commentary around Judai, I think, has been positive. I know a few people maybe don't particularly like him, but I've always loved the journey that Judai Yuki went on. I mean, I think it's a very relatable journey. I think he's one of the more relatable Yu-Gi-Oh protagonists that you have, where you start as this very innocent, fun-loving kid, and that's exactly how he started in the early parts of this show. And then whether it was the Shadow Riders, whether it was the Society of Light, or whether really it was Yubel, that was like the ultimate moment. You kind of go through these changes in your life, and you have to become a hardened version of yourself. And, you know, you don't have to necessarily lose your identity, but at some point, like, you do have to grow up. And that innocent view that you have of the world can be shattered very, very quickly and easily as you grow up and go through the trials and tribulations of, you know, what we know as life, and seeing that journey play out through Judai's eyes, and eventually seeing him get to a place of what I always kind of equated it as, like, depression, where he became the Supreme King, and was just kind of stuck in his own mind, and seeing like that character from so early on in the show, fun-loving, saw the good in everyone, become the legitimate Supreme King in season 3. Every time I think about it, it's like jaw-dropping. And then when you see him in season 4, like, watch a random season 1 episode and then watch a random season 4 episode, and it's night and day, but the journey makes sense. It never felt like it didn't make sense to me. And I think the overall theme of being at school and growing up over the years, like, your most transformative years usually are high school and college. Those are usually your most transformative years. So to have that, as well as the beautiful backdrop that the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime had, I thought was really cool. I always loved the main protagonist, and I loved the setting of where the show took place. And I get asked all the time, if you could be in one Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, what series would it be? And my answer is always Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I love the thought of a dual school dedicated to learning and teaching dueling. And I feel like school is where you transform into kind of the new version of yourself, and we saw that specifically with Judai. And he was someone for me who, especially in those first 2 seasons, really carried the show. I loved his story, loved his journey. He's one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonists to this day, and I thought he really shined as your first main character that was not Yugi and Atem. And he had big shoes to fill, because Yugi and Atem is such an iconic protagonist, of course, being the first, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist. But, you know, without getting into too specific details, those were 2 things that I really loved about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, the setting and the main protagonist. I thought those were 2 huge pros for the GX anime. And Yubel, of course, having a top 10 villain is nothing to, you know, look away at as well. Rarity, I'll start with you. I mean, when you think Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, kind of what's your connection with it, and just how do you feel about it overall?
Well, as someone who's been basically a lifelong student, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys know I'm a PhD student, so I'm a glutton for academic punishment, of course.
Right.
So, of course, the school setting and all the stuff all the characters get into relating to the school and the setting is very relatable to me, and I agree. It's a super, really fun setting, and they do everything they could with it. The only thing I think they didn't really do it was like a prom episode or something. I low-key wish we had prom, like dual prom or something. There was like a party, right, that I think like Adrian Gecko like threw on or something, but that's not a prom. Like, I think it would have been cool. But they had like the school festival, right? And they had like the random sports team, like the random tennis duel. But what's interesting about GX for me, when you think of the show, you think of Judai. But when I think of GX, I think of almost everybody around him. That's not to say I don't love Judai. I really agree with you. I'm probably not going to repeat what you said. Everything about his journey is absolutely incredible. And his transformation as a protagonist and learning his connection to Yubel, him being the reincarnation of the Supreme King, all that good stuff. Awesome. But for me, when I think of GX, I think of the really cool and memorable characters like Jim Crocodile Cook, Hasselberry, Aster Phoenix, people like them really, really stick. Oh, and Johan, of course, and Yubel. I think about the characters a whole lot, like the side characters. It's really funny. My 2 faves in GX is like Hasselberry and Jim, and they're the two dinosaur characters, like, or fossil themed people, which normally they're not my favorite in Yu-Gi-Oh, but I some for reason like the two of them. It's interesting. I think more about them and the antics they get into, which normally filler antics in anime is hit or miss for me. Sometimes I really enjoy it and sometimes I don't, but GX is like quote unquote filler. Even in the first 2 seasons, I really liked. I thought it was really, really funny. The dub made it even funnier. We'll talk about that next month. But I really just love the shenanigans they got all into. And I think GX's most defining factor to me, other than the school fetting, is the focus on dual spirits. I think this is the show that arguably uses that concept the most. And as a big fan of dual spirits interacting with the human characters and doing all that cool stuff, like them going to the alternate dimensions of the dual monster world and all that stuff, I love that stuff. 10 out of 10. Season 3 is great for that reason, and I really loved exploring that bond between a duelist and their cards. And it wasn't just with Judai. We obviously saw this with Johan as well on Fujiwara, right, with Honest, right? I believe that's, am I remembering that right? Season 4 guy. Is it Fujiwara?
Yeah. Fujiwara Yusuke,
Honest,
yep.
yeah. So all these cool monster duelist connection. And of course, Manjome and the Anjamas. You cannot forget them, of course. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think that GX just, while it isn't my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not, it's never, I'd say it's in the middle for me, but it's never a bad show. I usually have nothing really bad to say about GX. And I just think it's a really fun, enjoyable ride, and I can see why GX has such a passionate and beloved fan base. I 1000% understand, and I think their passion for it, even to this day, is absolutely incredible. And I think it has some really cool stories to tell. Like, we'll most likely get into Yubel later, but the story of Yubel is probably one of the most captivating Yu-Gi-Oh villain stories that I think we've ever gotten. I just think that the concept of toxic love is so interesting that Yu-Gi-Oh would explore that as a plot point, considering they never talk about romance whatsoever, most of the time. And they focus their main villain on that, about the concept of love and what that means and how that can affect people in your connection. So overall, GX is a really fun time. And I always have a good time talking about it, always I'm thinking about it. And yeah, but as a sequel to DM, it's kind of a sequel, but not. It takes place in the same universe, but when we do see some old characters, like Pegasus showing up was great. But overall, I wouldn't consider it a proper sequel in the sense compared to, let's say, Go Rush to Sevens in that aspect.
I agree with that, yeah. And seeing Pegasus, seeing like the Paradox Brothers early on, it was a concept that I felt maybe had a little bit more potential. I get not wanting to risk bringing in characters like a Joey Wheeler or Kaiba. I mean, Kaiba did show up. It was very, very brief. I'm talking about for maybe an extended period of time because you do not want to like maybe overshadow the characters that you're trying to build up in GX, but I still felt like there was maybe more potential to explore the fact that these shows did take place in the same universe. But yeah, I would agree. Sure, sequel in the sense of, yes, it happened after Duel Monsters, but not a sequel in the sense that, like, it's very closely tied to Duel Monsters. So definitely agree with that. And, yeah, all well said, Rarity. JC, Legendary Duels. I know GX is, I believe, one of your favorites. Talk about GX, man. What are some things that you just really, really love about it? And how do you feel just about GX overall?
Yeah, definitely for me, GX is very special for me. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even be sitting here talking with you guys if it wasn't for GX. I would have never met any of you. For me, it's a very personal show because it's what got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, I had actually quit Yu-Gi-Oh! Like near the end of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Not because I hated the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything like that, but it kind of got to the point where I was watching a lot of reruns and stuff like that, and I also wasn't able to play the card game with anyone, so it kind of got to the point where I kind of got bored and I guess kind of lonely, so I kind of just wrapped up my cards. I said, all right, I'm not watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore. I'm going to put my cards in the closet and I'm moving on, you know. And then I remember I was watching TV. I was on Toonami. You guys know Toonami. And I was on Toonami just scrolling through the channels, and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was playing, and I did not want to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I was like, no, I moved on from Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not coming back to this. We're done. We're moving on. And but I couldn't run, so I was going through the channels and I was like, all right, there's nothing here. All right, whatever. I guess I'll watch GX. Let me give it a shot. Let me see what it's about. And yeah, that's kind of what got me started. Actually, the first episode I watched of GX in the dubbed, obviously on Toonami, was episode 3, Jaden versus Alexis, when they went into the dorm room and slept in. And yeah, it was yeah. So very interesting episode to get into, but yeah. So it was really fun. It was really goofy. Obviously, you know, I know we're talking about the subbed, but yeah, I started obviously watching the dubbed, and just like you know, once season 3 was over, there's nothing there. In order to finish the show, you have to watch it subbed. So that's what got me into watching it subbed, and then once again, I rewatched GX subbed and rewatched it a couple times subbed, and I just love the show so much. I love Jaden as a protagonist. Obviously, he's my favorite protagonist. Elemental Heroes is my favorite deck of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh! And yeah, I love his personality. I love everything about him, his energy, just different. You know, obviously we have a Tem who's like, you know, kind of very serious and focused. And you know, very intense in a lot of ways. And then you have Yugi, who's more timid and shy and kind of soft-spoken and all that. But Jaden's just so vibrant and loud, and he's confident and very energetic, and I just love that vibe. It really resonated with me. I just really loved his personality and how he interacted with others, and how people just like, you know, gravitated towards his personality and that light that he brought into it, and just the fun of it. Like, he just loved to play Yu-Gi-Oh! For fun, and that's why I love season 1 and even season 2 July, because there's just this passion he has for the game that is just so great. Like, he just enjoys it. He finds it a thrill, and that is infectious to the other characters around him, as he earns their respect, not because he's trying to, but just because he's doing his thing and he loves the game so much. And it's just so attractive, and it got me. It attracted me too, just that passion he has for the game, because that's what I had. Obviously, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Again after that, and now I'm here. So, and I've never turned my back since. You know, even through, you know, when 5Ds popped up, it was a little iffy whether or not I was gonna like, you know, duels on motorcycles, but I stuck with that, and ever since I've just been watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And it just never like fully disappointed me. I kept watching. I just love the game, and I love the shows, and I love the stories they make. And yeah, GX is very special to me. I love season 1 and season 2 as the funny slice of life comedy that it kind of was, and I love it for that reason. Actually, like, I love season 3. It's probably my favorite season, but I love season 1 and 2. I just love the dynamics with the characters, how the relationships formed. I feel like season 1 is very underrated, because that's when we get introduced to all the characters and how their relationships and friendships grow. And you know, we got Chaz, right? Chaz Princeton, aka Manjome Thunder, his whole journey of where he started to where he ended up. I feel like that's such a just fantastic story. And he's a very different rival from Kaiba and all the future rivals. He's very unique, and that's why I love the Chaz as well, because he has a very unique, well-written story that doesn't really get appreciated much. And yeah, I just love a lot of the other characters too, and I just love how they all interact. I love slice of life stuff. I really do. I just love seeing characters interact with each other. And just like build those relationships outside of just dueling, both in and outside of dueling. And I feel like that's what, you know, some other Yu-Gi-Oh! Series are missing, is that slice of life. You need that to feel connected to the characters and their relationships with each other in order to build that bond with them and feel like you're one of them, you know? And I just love that kind of family friendship bond that was built in GX, and because of Jaden and his personality. But yeah, GX, just gold tier. And obviously we'll talk about Yubel much later, because Yubel's like top tier villain of Yu-Gi-Oh! For me, top tier. So I definitely want to get into that later, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. Love the passion. That's why, you know, Rarity made a good call bringing this guy on, because I knew he'd have the passion for Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
I know, I have to, man. I have to bring on the good people. And we have a few other special guests already lined up for future stuff too,
Yes,
so I'm very
yes,
excited.
I very much appreciate the opportunity.
It helps when, of course, like, because it's always going to be a show that all of us aren't the biggest fan in, so it's really cool to see other people who are really more passionate or more of an expert on certain things, of course. So it's really awesome, and thank you for your thoughts, JC. I love your passion. It's so infectious. You're like making me love GX even more than I already do, just for hearing you talk about how much it like changed your life. That's what Yugioh does. That's the whole point of the podcast. This
Very
is why
true.
we're here.
That's exactly it. I mean, listen, every show, has people that have really, like, deeply resonated with it. That's why I always find it funny when certain people, and there's a lot of people online, they're like, oh, this show is like, should have never happened, or Yu-Gi-Oh should have ended after GX or whatever. And it's like, well, listen, but then you're robbing people the opportunity that have really connected with some of these other shows that, like, have either gotten them back into Yu-Gi-Oh or gotten them into a community or gotten them to become friends with people. That's the beautiful thing about this franchise, and I think what makes it so unique, because there are so many shows. But definitely want to keep it, obviously, into the scope of GX, because we have a lot to talk about here. I think the best way to do it, I mean, listen, there's 4 seasons, right? I mean, you have the Shadow Riders arc as the primary season 1, you have the Society of Light as season 2, Yubel season 3, and then Darkness season 4. I mean, I think we'll just go season by season, and I mean, I'll kind of just start it real quick. I make jokes a lot, and I will reiterate for the people watching that are ready for me to say it, it is a joke where I make the joke on the podcast, well, GX gets good around episode 100. That's kind of the joke I always say. Now, behind every joke, maybe there's a little tiny sliver of truth in some instances. And in this instant, maybe there's a very small, tiny slither of truth. Now, JC has spoken to something that I actually do agree with, and I do love GX. I have a love-hate relationship with this element, that it did show so much slice of life. And I actually thought that was something that, shows like maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains missed out on. I think Zexal actually did a really good job with mixing in slice of life early on with more like serious stuff. For me, GX sometimes leans a little too much into the slice of lifeness, where I wish there was maybe a little bit more of like a balance, if that makes sense. But that being said, if you enjoy like slice of life and like a lot of like random stuff happening to our gang, I think you're really probably a fan of like early Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, because there was a lot of really good character moments in random episodes, and like early on, really before the Shadow Riders stuff started, which didn't really happen until like the late 20s, early 30s, I believe. There was just a lot of random crap. You never knew what was going to happen. You didn't know if, Crowler was going to get hit in the head with a tennis ball or a baseball, or they were going to be chasing down a dude that looked like Tarzan, that's stealing egg witches. I mean, dude, there are so many random episodes. It's crazy. So season 1 for me, I thought when the Shadow Rider stuff started, it got there was just a point where I kind of wanted it to get to more like plot heavy stuff, and I felt like it stayed in the slice of life a little too long. But the Shadow Riders were interesting. I liked Camula a lot. I think the other Shadow Riders were a little forgettable, including Kagimaru. So season 1, actually GX is the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Show, I think, where it's like this for me, where my favorite seasons are in backwards order. So the way I'd rank it, we'll hear from Rarity and JC, their quick thoughts season by season and their rankings of each season as well. But for me, my rankings of GX seasons, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I think it's the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Where that holds true, where I actually prefer, I just have the rankings from like the last to best, but that's also a good thing, because it means every season was better than the last for me. And so season 2, Society of Light, I did enjoy a little bit more. Sayu, I thought, was an okay main villain. Obviously, you learn that the Society of Light is kind of backing him. I thought Edo really carried hard in season 2. I thought the rivalry between Edo and Judai, and then, of course, the bond and friendship that they would have to develop in order to take down Sayu and the Society of Light later in the season. And I believe they dueled against Sayu's sister, if I'm remembering that correctly. Mm-hmm. So there were cool dynamics there. And Edo was kind of like the teaser of what direction GX was going to go. It's like season 2, wow, they brought in this really cool new student character. Well, guess what? In season 3, we're going to bring in 4 of them. And that's an element that I loved in season 3. Forget about the Yubel stuff, because as JC said, top tier. Yeah, I mean, I just did top 10 villains, and I have Yubel in that top 10 villain list. If you're a top 10 villain, you're an A-tier villain. Yubel is an incredible villain. I know Rarity is going to talk. We'll all talk about that a little more. Or I'll let them talk about it because I've talked about Yubel a little bit, and I'm sure they have a lot of great things to say about Yubel because you could talk about Yubel for probably hours. But season 3 I thought was better because it was the first time where we really not only saw a major shift in Judai's character, but we really had a very compelling villain, which was something that I thought the first 2 seasons of GX just lacked a little bit. But to see Judai's continued growth, to see characters like Johan, O'Brien, Crocodile Cook, even Amon, and I can't stand Amon, but that was the point of his character, so it worked. I was happy to see him eventually, basically die in that duel against Yubel, but he caused some damage, man. The Exodia subplot, people forget about the Exodia subplot. That also I thought was so freaking interesting and compelling. So season 3 did a lot of things really well. But my favorite season, and I'm excited, I think at some point I'm going to debate my friend Dredger about this. We've thought about doing like a debate Yu-Gi-Oh series, where I actually do believe season 4 is better than season 3, which I think is a bit of an unpopular opinion. I think most people view seasons 3 and 4 as 2 of the best GX ones, but I think most people view season 3 as the best. For me, I loved seeing the payoff from season 3 in terms of what Judai was acting as. I thought Judai was such a badass in that final season. And yes, the season was quick, but it also had such a creepy vibe. And I thought the way that we saw characters get their backstories expunged through the medium of darkness was so freaking well done. I think that O'Brien episode with his parents is one of the most emotional, chilling episodes in all of maybe the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, especially in GX. I loved what they did. It just showed how evil, truly despicably evil, Darkness and his Truman allies were, and I thought it built up the threat really well. Seeing the Sayu duel and the rematch duel, seeing the Judai Kronos duel early on, which was a callback to, of course, their episode 1 duel. Season 4 had some, and then, of course, Judai Johan teaming up. Season 4 had some amazing moments in it. Loved seeing the payoff from season 3. And yeah, I think seasons 3 and 4 are 2 of the strongest seasons, genuinely, in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it makes GX worth watching, even if I'm maybe not the biggest fans of the first 2, just to get to 3 and 4. But listen, I've rambled a lot. Rarity, I want to know how you rank the seasons. Then if you just want to go season by season here, any thoughts, pros, cons, would love to hear it from you.
Well, thank you. So, for me, funny enough, I'm probably, I know JC said earlier season 3 was his favorite. I'm in agreement. Season 3 is my favorite. But funny enough, I like season 2 more than season 4. I'm an unpopular opinion gal, I know.
Yeah,
interesting. I think it's because I really enjoy the Society of Light as a concept, and I really liked that they took away Manjome, they took away Asuka, this creepy cult in the background, while you see Manjome at the beginning of the season, right? We all think the Society of Light's is kind of this joke at the beginning, right? Remember when he was trying to paint the door in white or whatever? And then it grows to this really serious threat where the Obelisk Blue Dorm was taken over and people were leaving. Even the thing with Misawa, which that was a whole thing there. And some of the one-off characters I thought were kind of interesting. I like the fact that they dueled Sayu's lawyer. I always thought that was funny. Just this lawyer in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just a random lawyer. It's funny because I feel like people could be suing people of all the stuff that happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! But I also think a reason I like season 2 a lot is I like Hasselberry, and he was a major part of season 2. So I think that's probably my bias. I've always loved him. I've always thought he was a fun concept for a character, a military sergeant with dinosaurs, and I loved everything about that. Plus the Dino DNA. I know it's a meme, but that's a cool idea for a concept. And also the Neospatians I thought were cool. I'm having Judai slowly connect with them with his deck, and that whole point where he kind of had that trauma, right? He couldn't duel for a little bit, and he had to kind of re-find himself. And also the connection of setting up, of course, for Yubel later, that a lot of those Neospatian cards, including even Dandelion, right, were cards that Judai made because of Kaiba. So connecting Kaiba with that, too, I thought was really cool. And plus, there's the Pegasus duel in there with, we see Toon Kingdom, and then he duels the 2 professors. That's also funny. But yeah, season 2, I think, is very underrated. I really like it. I liked it when I was a kid, too. But season 4, they're very, very close. I think season 4 for me is just a little too dark. I think on rewatch.
That's fair.
For me,
That's fair.
It's
Yeah.
very, very good. But for me, I like a balance in terms of stuff, and it has some of the strongest stuff in it. Of course, you've already mentioned all the strengths. Of course, I really liked Fujiwara finally getting the whole, like, you know, the missing, you know, connecting the people who were missing from the incident in season 1, connecting that with Atticus as well. I really liked, I like the resolving for Sho, right? I'm taking over for his brother. I thought that was really cool. I liked the Manjome thing with Edo, where Edo was kind of being a jerk to Manjome, and then Manjome kind of said, screw you, in the Ojama costume. Very, very funny. But I really like that focus on them figuring out what they're going to do after they graduate. As someone who's still kind of keeping their options open, even now when I get a doctor in front of my name, I relate very much. And of course, I don't think we mentioned the ceremonial duel with having Judai go back in time to duel Yuki at his peak. Perfect way to end the show. Perfect way. And yeah, so that's probably my thoughts on 4. 3, which I argue is the best. I love Johan. He is one of my favorite characters. And the fact that I know a lot of people, it's controversial whether you like Johan or not because he kind of takes over the plot. But what I really like about Johan is that he really relates to Judai as someone who's kind of, number one, on his level dueling-wise, but also with the spirit thing. Because Manjome doesn't really like Judai that much. He's always kind of mean to him. So, like, literally, Johan was like, bestie. You know, bestie. Like, he just became his, like, bestie. And I perfectly believed how they bonded so quickly. And to see Yubel get so petty as to kidnap and then brainwash Johan and use his form, right? And that really cool sexy outfit, by the way. One of the best designs in Yugioh. I love his evil outfit with the dual disc. I love that design. And like using it with the creepiness of like saying you're hurting your friend. Do you love him more than me? Whether you're in however you decide to view Judai and Yubel's relationship and Judai and Johan, however you try to view it, there's a lot of different ways in the fandom. I personally like Judai and Johan as a couple. I think they're cute. But I also think that, and Yubel's kind of acting like a spoiled ex kind of view. It makes the show more fun if you view it that way. So I think that's really a really cool element. They decided to go with that in Yubel's whole story about, again, the toxic love and what you're willing to do for someone. And then, of course, then you learn that, you know, with the whole Supreme King connection, too. It's like just adds this extra element right there at the end in Judai's sacrifice to fuse himself with Yubel to bring them together as one person. It makes me cry every time I think about it. It's one of the most emotional scenes in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's just so unbelievably powerful to me. And just, you know, that image of Judai falling asleep in Yubel's arms as they go off to, you know, fix everything. And then you don't know if he'll come back until season 4, right? It's just really, really nice. And season 1's a lot of fun. I like a lot of the shenanigans in that one, too. Really memorable one-offs. I love the tennis duel. I like the Little Bugowski, the dub. We'll talk about that next week. Moki, man. Moki. I like the stuff with Manjome and his brothers throughout the season. There was a few instances of that, including the duel where he duels his brother with those weird deck stipulations, and he found them all in the well. I like Duel Monster Spirit Day. I love that episode a lot. It's cool to see the characters dress up. And the Shadow Riders were also cool. I'm surprised you didn't mention Night Shroud. Night Shroud's memorable. You're a Red Eyes fan. How can you not mention Night Shroud as a memorable Shadow Rider? Oh no, fake Red Eyes fan. Fake Red Eyes fan over here, guys. Fake Red Eyes fan.
Fake Red Eye. Yeah, that was an oversight.
It's okay. There's a lot of characters, but Camula and him are definitely the most memorable. But also Professor Banner becoming the bad guy. Really cool. And I like his alchemy deck. I wish it was printed. It's a cool idea for a deck. And the Sacred Beasts. Super, super cool concept. And the fact, again, Yubel used them later. Super, super awesome. So yeah, I think all the story arcs are pretty good. I would say that season 3 is like, I would say like S tier, and I would say like S tier, and then I would say 2 and 4 are like really close, and then I put season 1 probably like in B. But overall, really good ride. And I love a lot of the characters, and that's what I have to say about it. JC, what are your thoughts on the seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and where would you rank them? I know you're with me in agreeing that season 3 is the best one, so I'm curious if any of our other opinions align.
Yeah, okay, so that's an interesting question, ranking the 4 seasons. Yeah, I'll put season 3 as number 1, and season 4 is number 2, I guess. And I don't, it feels kind of hard for me to rank it, because like I love the first half, season 1 and 2, for completely different reasons than I love the second half. Obviously, the second half is a lot more darker, very intensely story focused. The first half, also has some story focus on different stuff, but like, you know, it's very slice of life and very fun and random, and that's why I love it too. So like, it's hard for me to like, I love them, like the first and second half for completely different reasons. So it's like hard for me to say. It's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, like, oh, season 1 is technically the worst, because I don't see it as the worst. But like, it's amazing for so many different reasons. So it's really hard for me to place it. But yeah, I guess I'll put number 3 as number 1, because it literally completely flipped the script on what season 1 and 2 did, and just went all in on what makes Yu-Gi-Oh great. Is one of the aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh's great is when they get really dark and really intense, and like that, like that's the richness of Yu-Gi-Oh when they go to that level, you know.
Yep.
So, and that's why I feel like it was great. There's a lot of great story elements in season 3, which I'll get into in a bit, but yeah, so season 3 kind of flipped the script literally, and then season 4 is the continuation, and like Dylan said, the payoff of what happened in season 3 and the change that happened to Judai and everything. It was all so good. It was all so great. So yeah, I guess it's hard for me to say. I think season 2 was better than season 1 in terms of like in terms of the story. I think the Society of Light was more compelling than the Dark Riders, than the Shadow Riders, because the Shadow Riders, a lot of them were mostly just like random, like goofy stuff. Like they weren't very serious, aside from like Camula. Kagumaru was kind of serious, but obviously, I mean, it's hard to take a buff man in a towel seriously in the final duel. But you know, and he's an old man that's trying to gain eternal life. I like the concept of that, but you know, once again, like he's just wearing a towel around his, like it's not, you know. And then like the scenery wasn't very like, of the duel, it wasn't very like dark or like gritty or anything like that. So it was kind of weird. So they definitely could have done better with the Shadow Riders. So I think the Shadow Riders arc was definitely the weakest, obviously. And oh yeah, and then obviously I loved you know, Professor Banner, you know, being a part of that group, and he was obviously the coolest one out of all of them, next to Camula. So that was awesome to see. Also, I love the Alchemy deck. But yeah, I love season 1 mainly especially because of the first half of season 1 before the Shadow Rider stuff, because that's like, you know, all the slice of life, like building up the characters and their relationships, all the stuff with Manjome happened in that arc, and his entire like character arc was like crazy good. And then the stuff with Zane and just everything. But yeah, so I guess season 1 would be the lowest in terms of like the story, you know, the villains and you know, the intensity of it, because there was a lot of goofy characters in the Shadow Riders arc that shouldn't have been goofy. They should have been more serious, in my opinion, than they were. So yeah, that's how I would rank it. I guess season 3, 4, 2, and then 1. Yeah. And then I guess to talk a little bit about season 1. Yeah, I like I said, I already kind of went through it. Season 1, I just love all the character development, character growth, all the slice of life stuff. That's what I really loved about season 1 the most. It was just fun to watch all that. I did like the Sacred Beast, these knockoff Egyptian god cards. I actually like them visually more than I like the Egyptian god cards, because I feel they just have a cooler like edge to them, like their design. But obviously I have a special place for the god cards always, but they changed them up a little bit, and I like what they did with it. I guess that's about it for. I mean, there's definitely different elements. Like I could go into different stuff about different characters, but that would take a while. So I'll just go into season 2. Season 2, I liked it as well. I liked the Society of Light arc with Sartorius. I thought that was a lot of fun and unique. This whole kind of like cult thing going on. If you get beat by the Society of Light, you become part of the cult and you become brainwashed, and then you become stronger as well and start, you know, obviously look at Manjome. He got washed by Sartorius, and then he just started knocking out the entire school just by himself. It was crazy. It just like, and it's just insane. Like, so Manjome is like really strong, and then obviously with the Society of Light, you just got that extra boost and was able to just knock out everybody. I thought the conclusion to that arc was kind of weird. It was funny, but it was kind of weird. But it was still fine. But Yeah, so I just thought all that stuff. Edo, fantastic character, fantastic. He just came in and just started putting in the work. He has the personality, the sass. He's got all that. He's got the D hero deck, which is a cool, dark elemental hero kind of deck. And then, he's also got. He just came in right away. So what does he do? Well, he fake loses to Judai, which we already know right away. So we're like, all right, well, what does this guy actually have? And then we see him duel against Zane, the top of the top. Even Jaden couldn't defeat him. He got to tie with him at the end of season 1, and then he just bodies Zane like nothing. That was incredible. And then Edo comes in for the rematch with Jaden, and he just bodies him right away. And so it's like he beat both the strongest characters from season 1 in season 2. Like, that's a strong performance. Like, we can go on maybe in a separate video about like the importance of Edo as a character and just how he just came in and just started washing everybody. Like, he was strong.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. So seeing that and then seeing Jaden come back and kind of settle that rivalry there, kind of win with the Neos and the Neospatian stuff, even though Jaden was still trying to figure out how to use his new Neospatians and the contact fusion and all that stuff. But that was really awesome. And then obviously we see the whole growth of him through, learning to become friends with him and then not trusting Sartorius, but, wanting his friend Sartorius back, who's not possessed by the light. I thought there was some really cool story elements to it. Yes, there was a lot of like slice of life / random stuff that happened just like in season 1, but if you just take it for the main story elements, I thought it was a good story, a good arc for it. But yeah, obviously moving into season 3 being incredible, when once again it flipped the script on everything. All right, so just brief thoughts on Yubel for season 3. Incredible villain. I love her mindset, the psychology behind it. Like Rarity said, the toxic love concept was very interesting. I love a lot of specific elements about it. I like this long-lasting relationship that she had, that she or he, whatever, had with Judai in the past, his memories getting wiped and stuff like that. I thought that was so interesting, and him feeling guilty throughout the season for what happened to Yubel and for leaving her, and then how that led into Johan being sent to another dimension and then obviously being absorbed. There's just a lot. It's just a deep, enriched story, but I thought Yubel was a fantastic villain. And I'll get into that after I speak about season 4. I'll start off the topic talking about Yubel. That's going to be good. I'll go in depth with that. But anyway, season 4, awesome season as well. We get to see, just how the story continued with Judai, how he was affected by it, how he came back changed. He did grow up, but he did lose a piece of himself, which is the fun-loving side that we all loved about him. But it was really awesome seeing Jaden just jumping off, burning, exploding buildings, and just being a cool badass, honestly. I love seeing that. That was so sick. Man, we got a little bit of that in Bonds Beyond Time right in the beginning too, of him jumping off buildings, dodging Cyber End Dragon Blast and all that stuff. So it was cool kind of seeing like Jaden in that kind of role where he's just kind of being a badass, taking things a lot more seriously. He wasn't as jokey as he was before. Just the light, the bright, light that he was just gone, and everybody could tell, and it was this empty void. Like, we could all feel it. It was kind of cool seeing it, but it's also like, man, I wish we could keep a little bit of that innocence back in him again. Like, because, once again, you grow up and life becomes hard, and it's hard to smile after a while, and it's hard to, like, kind of enjoy things because you see the real darkness of life after a while, and it's hard to be so happy anymore and just enjoy things and enjoy the small things in life, like him not enjoying dueling anymore and just seeing it as, just getting from point A to point B and kind of protecting the world. And he wanted to run away from Duel Academy because he felt responsible for everything that's happened there. It's all his fault, and he feels a massive guilt from it. And it's not entirely all his fault, but I mean, some of it was, because most of the villains wanted him in one way or another. So it was kind of his fault, but like not really. But yeah, season 4 was fantastic. I thought they wrapped it up really well with the Yuki versus Judai duel. Him getting his love back for dueling by dueling the king of games himself in this weird kind of dream parallel world, whatever it was. I second Dylan's theory. I do think it was a dream as well, or if not, some sort of spiritual realm kind of thing. Who knows what that was, but it was awesome. I thought the way he got his smile and joy back was great. But yeah, those are my thoughts on season 1 through 4. And yeah, I guess we'll hop into the discussion about Yubel. All right, so where do I begin with Yubel? Yubel's a very special character. I love the writers. They put a lot of effort into this. You can argue, once again, season 1 and 2 lacked some focus, and season 3, obviously, they had complete focus. I don't know. It seemed like they had a plan from the very beginning. Obviously, Yubel was around since the very beginning. Yubel is a great villain. I love a villain who is playing a role throughout the entire either show or series. Like, it's playing, like, the villain has to be playing a role, has to be manipulative and kind of, stringing people along and moving the pieces around. And even better also when the villain also has a compelling reason, even if it's kind of twisted, a compelling reason for why they're doing what they're doing. They're not just doing it because they're just evil, but they're doing it, it's a little bit more complicated. Yubel was very twisted and evil, but it was way more complicated than that. She was also mentally tortured herself, and she had a twisted perception of love. That's what I liked about Yubel, is like the story was uniquely interesting for Yubel, because Yubel was obviously with Jaden in a past life, which we didn't find out until the very end. But even from when Jaden, was reincarnated as a little kid and Yubel was with him, she was always protecting him. But she was already crazy even before she got messed up with the light of destruction, energy in space. So she was already a little twisted. So it wasn't like she had some issues, but she was already killing people to, whenever Judai cried after losing the duel. So she took things a little too seriously. And, she got sent away to be purified from the darkness that was inside of her. But obviously, that kind of went wrong. She got, taken over by the light of society waves. And I love the mindset, because she is doing what she's doing because she loves Jaden. So while she was in space suffering because she was being tortured by the light of destruction energy, she was being tortured, but she was kind of hating Judai for Judai sending her away. She was being tortured, and she was getting angry at Judai for sending her away, but because she loved Judai so much, she was trying to convince herself mentally that Jaden sent her away, or Judai sent her away, in order to make her stronger, in order to help her. And so in that mindset is she hates what's happening. This is very painful, but she's doing Jaden's doing it for my own good at the same time. So she kind of has this dual personality throughout, even while she's dueling him and everything, where she is crying because of all the pain she went through, but is also really thinks that he did it for a good reason, but he doesn't even know that she her capsule got separated from the Neos and the Neospatians, and that she she didn't know what his plan was, and then obviously with his memory getting wiped and stuff like that, recovering all those memories, and just so I just like the psychology and mentality. But it wasn't as simple as she was just torturing everyone because she was evil. She was actually torturing Judai and everyone because she was tortured, and she thought Jaden was trying to make her better, so she was going to torture him as well in order to make him stronger as well. So it was because she had that twisted mindset, she thought that that's what love is, that love is causing pain and suffering onto the person that you love, right? That toxic love, and that kind of makes them stronger in a weird way, and then kind of torturing other people around them also makes them strong. So it was obviously all wrong. That's not love at all, but that's how she became what she became. And once Jaden took responsibility for that and fused their souls together, she was able to be purified from that toxic mentality and all that. But Yubel was just a great villain. She was a villain that was all throughout season 3, from when she was just an arm trying to revive her full body and possessing different people, and she just played a massive role throughout the whole season. It wasn't just like she, there was hints of her throughout the season, like we heard of her, and then she popped up at the end, and that was it. Like a lot of villains are like that, like where we hear about them and then they pop up at the end. They get one duel, maybe they win that one duel, and then the next one they lose. But like she had multiple duels because she possessed different people and dueled in different bodies, and so like she actually played a completely active role in the story and was manipulating and controlling everything. Obviously everything with Johan too, and it just possessing Johan to just torture Judai as well, and she was also jealous of that relationship, which I know Rarity will get into that, so I'll let her talk about that. But yeah, so I don't know, Yubel was just a fantastic and very unique villain. The only villain that was done that specific way. And it's weird that it came from GX, but yeah, it came from GX, that kind of villain story. Definitely very psychotic and strange, but I loved it for that reason, because it's very unique. It's that toxic love, that misunderstanding kind of love, and it's twisted, but it had a good ending, but then obviously Jaden became different because of that and all that. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on Yubel. I think Yubel's a fantastic villain, very unique story, very unique psychology behind what she's doing, how she ended up there. I felt like they put a lot of effort into season 3 and Yubel, and I think it paid off. I do think that the relationship between Yubel and Supreme King Jaden from the past wasn't explored much. Like it was just, they kind of mentioned it very late, like literally at the last duel, and it was very brief, and I kind of wish we got more flashbacks about that relationship, because I feel like it was just kind of thrown in randomly, and it was just kind of awkward. Like I was like, okay, all of a sudden Jaden was the Supreme King in the past. Like that was kind of hinted upon throughout the show, but like I feel like we didn't get much from that. Like much exploration on his past life, kind of like how in DM we got a lot of exploration about Attempt's past life and stuff like that. It didn't have to go as deep as that, but like a little bit more would have been nice. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Yubel. I'm done rambling.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm sure a lot of people appreciated hearing that, because Yubel is, I think, viewed by many to be one of the greatest villains, especially spin-off villains, probably in the entire franchise. A fun fact about Yubel, I believe, as well, they're one of the only villains, a major villain, that was never actually beaten in a duel. So, just to add on to everything Legendary Duels said there, they were also a character that was a very good duelist, and feel like we've seen it before with villains where they get involved at the very end, they have one big duel, and usually they lose, but they were maybe manipulating things the whole way through. And sometimes Darkness actually is probably a good example of that. The very next season villain, depending on how you kind of view the Truman servants, whether you view them as individuals or extensions of him. I view them as extensions of him, but if you view them as their own character, then yeah, Darkness shows up at the end, and that's it. Kagimaru, great example in season 1, shows up at the end, and that's it. And Yubel was one of those characters that was around for pretty much the entirety of the season and was involved from a dueling perspective, had multiple duels while they were possessing characters, and then just, of course, had the one at the end with themselves, which, of course, the super fusion happened, and never lost. So, that was, an element of that character that made them that much more intimidating, because it's crap, we can't even beat this who's gonna beat this character in a duel? They're also, an incredibly tough duelist, which I think just adds to the, power theming of the character. But yeah, they are a really, really good character. A top tier villain. I think one of the best spin-off villains for sure. Certainly up there with the likes of Vector, Lightning, some of the best spin-off villains we've seen. I think probably maybe the third or fourth best spin-off villain that I would say in all of the franchise, which is high praise. Rarity, I'll let you talk if you have anything you want to add. I mean, I think JC did a really good job covering it, but anything you just want to touch on here regarding Yubel's character?
Yeah, I just want to say really good analysis of Yubel, JC. So claps for you. So awesome. I kind of touched on this earlier a little bit about the romantic angle, whether you choose to interpret Yubel's love for Judai in a romantic way and how you could incorporate the Johan plot with that. I like viewing it again in that romantic way, as it just, I think, adds to it that Judai was slowly developing feelings maybe for Johan, or maybe Yubel thought that was the direction they were going and then got jealous. I think any kind of character dynamic, again, even if it's platonic, I think like the fact that they got jealous that this new person, because remember, Yubel hasn't seen Judai with all his friends this whole time. They've been in that canister. So you see him with this new person who also has dual spirits, right? You know, like, there's that too. And even Yubel getting almost kind of jealous of Neos, which I think is kind of cool that, you know, that gets resolved later, right? With the fusion, Neos Wiseman in season 4, right? They kind of like, and I also want to say, I'm so happy kind of that Yubel is like a meta deck now. When Yubel was one of the worst decks ever, and a really cool idea.
It was garbage.
Yeah, I mean, now it's awesome in meta. So I think that Yubel has a deck that firmly in the real game goes at their level of badassery and dueling prowess, as you both have praised. So I'm very happy for that. Plus, I think all the card art's really cool. I think that's awesome. And Yubel's, again, story of someone who was devoted to someone. I know you were saying, JC, a little bit overboard, but when you think about it, like, Yubel went through a transformation to become this demonic guardian of... And Judai didn't know he was a king as a little kid, but they did.
Right? Yeah.
Right? And what his destiny to, you know, save the world was. I mean, if you could think anybody could potentially get him off that road, and Yubel, of course, put Judai on the road to becoming the Supreme King, and they take credit for that. And they set up this whole scenario to make that happen for awakening Hau from inside of Judai and all of that stuff, which I didn't even touch on Hau either. Because I don't know if you guys, do you think Hau is a separate character? Because I've always seen Hau as a separate character than Judai himself.
Oh, yeah. It's always kind of confused me a little bit, but I do view it as like it's an extension of him, but it feels like it's a I don't know. I mean, JC, how do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, it wasn't explored much. The whole Supreme King concept in terms of who he was in his past life and what he was like and what, like, just that whole thing wasn't explored much. Like, it was, like, hinted at kind of here and there, but they didn't really expand upon it. And that's why I think it was kind of, you know, just kind of weak in that element. Everything was great except for that. I felt like they could have just explored that more. It would have been cool if maybe, like, throughout season 3, we see Jaden maybe getting some of his memories back, like little flashes of it or dreams of that. So that way, like, when we get to that point, it isn't kind of thrown in out of nowhere, and then we kind of just are like, all right, well, but who is the Supreme King? What was his role in the past? You know, and all that stuff. It's like, well, what was all this really like about? Is the Supreme King really an evil person, or was the Supreme King power a good power? Because they said the Supreme King power, the gentle darkness, is not necessarily an evil power, but Jaden was obviously really depressed and it took over him and it brought out the darkness in him, but it kind of makes it seem and makes us interpret as the Supreme King power as evil, but it's not actually evil. It's supposed to be good, but because it was during his darkest moment that it was awakened in him, it kind of came across as bad. But like I said, that whole aspect of his past ancient life with Yubel, and the Supreme King as a whole, like, wasn't explored, and I feel like that's where they missed. That could have, like, hit home better if they had explored that more throughout season 3.
Oh, 1,000%. And I think a lot of fans have definitely explored that, especially with people have also added interpretation in the fandom. I've seen with the Crystal Protector Pendulum card that looks just like Johan, and people have had some fan theory that he was someone also in Hau's life. Of course, that's fan fiction, but
yeah, that's
like what I the one thing about it being open end is that fans can take those interpretations and these newer cards that are coming out to create more stories, which you guys all know. I'm a big fan of people doing stuff with characters. I absolutely love AUs. I love, you know, all that stuff. So I like the interpretation and also just even adding it to when you watch. But yeah, Yubel just is in a league of their own. I know you were talking about Vector and Lightning. I wasn't the biggest fan of Lightning, but I really liked Vector. I think Yubel is my favorite spin-off villain. I think Yubel just is in a category of all their own, not only for being a dual spirit villain, because I don't consider Zark a dual spirit villain, because Zark was human, right? I don't consider him that. But just what happens if we have a dual monster as a threat? No wonder they're good duelists. They're a dual monster. Like, and the fact that Yubel used all these different decks, like made the advanced Crystal Beast and was a badass with all of those decks, right? Like, normally in Yugioh, you see the characters use the same decks all the time. But Yubel used, like, what, 2 or 3? 3, right? Because they used the Sacred Beast deck. No, they also used the Exodia deck too, right? When they dueled Amon the first time. There was like 4 decks. Yeah, with the Exodia thing. So like, and like them possessing, manipulating all of the characters. I forgot the Professor Viper, Marcel, right? Manipulating all of that stuff. And again, like putting Johan inside the Rainbow Dragon card. Like all this stuff is so good. And it's just a mastercraft of antagonist story writing where, again, as you guys said, you're sympathetic. You understand how they feel, but it's still wrong. And I think if you're able to sympathize with an antagonist or a villain and they get a really good quote-unquote redemption at the end, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Does that really well with their quote-unquote redeeming their villains if they have them. I could talk about Zuijo Zervelgear all day. That'll be for next year's Go Rush video, hopefully, if that show ends. We'll see. I could do a whole thing about him and a similar I feel about him, about redeeming an antagonist who was there throughout the show and you understand what they do and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Yubel's great. And again, I'm super happy they have really good support now. And just are dominating the meta. Like, it's just so cool that they took, again, one of the worst, arguably, decks that people were using, to farm it. Does anyone else remember Yubel Farm and Duel Links, like, back in the day? Does anyone else remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, Yubel Farm, yes. Right? Yubel Farm. Like, that was what Yubel was being used for until, like, recently. So, I'm just happy for Yubel, and I think that they deserve it. Just one of my favorite villains in all of I think they're, like, really up there for me. Like, I think I said it in the DM video, my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Villain is Pegasus. I think Yubel is like either 2 or 3. Very, very high up there. I love Yubel. Just, chef's kiss. And I don't think we've had a villain like them since. And I'm kind of sad. I hope in the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! We get a dual spirit villain. I know we have the Chronicles, but that doesn't count because everybody's a dual monster. That doesn't count. Like, everybody's a dual monster. So,
yeah,
but if I would love to have another dual spirit main villain again, or just someone to that extent. And I know you can say the Valkyrians are cards that can think, but they're not dual monsters. They're artificial beings, not dual monsters.
No, yeah.
Different thing. But yeah, Yubel's great.
Yubel is wonderful. And certainly whether you say they're the best spin-off, one of the best spin-offs villains, wherever you have them. I mean, they're certainly the most unique villain. I think there's been nobody like them. In the sense of like having this like insane love for the main protagonist and just seeing their interpretation of love, as JC did a great job laying out, and being, of course, a dual monster spirit, which is really, really cool. I mean, with a show like this, there's really so much to talk about. I feel like we've covered a lot in terms of like characters. I will say, how about maybe like
favorite
if we want to go around and say what's that, Rarity?
Favorite characters? We haven't really talked about who our faves. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but it's like
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Maybe like 3 favorite characters from the show. I feel like I don't know if anybody wants to go first. If not, I don't mind going.
I can go because I haven't started a segment, so I can go, I guess.
Yeah, you go, Rarity. Your 3 favorite characters from GX.
Okay, my 3 favorites are, as I said earlier, I think Tyranno is my favorite character. I know that seems weird to probably some of you. I mentioned him earlier. I just always thought he was cool. And I'm not even a dinosaur fan. I know, Dylan, you're hardcore dinosaur duelist. You love dinosaurs. But yep. I just really loved his personality. I think it's cool. We don't get a lot of black-coded characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Very often. So, and of course we have O'Brien, of course, in GX too. I thought he was really cool. And again, being someone who has military stuff, as someone, I have family who was in the military. So anything related to that's probably the reason I love Zuijo and Yugioh so much is that uniqueness to that real-world aspect of, like, things. And I thought the fact that he took, that dinosaur bone that he was excavating and then like put it in his body, was able to save him, and then he got the dino DNA powers. I always liked that with like him getting the eyes right and being able to sense stuff. He blocked off Sayu's brainwashing on his own. He was so cool. And then Jim Crocodile Cook, where did you go? Why did you have to disappear? I know you made a whole video about that, Dylan, but I love him. I think the fact we have a Yu-Gi-Oh character who has a alligator like accompanying him is so cool. He had just the chillest vibe, and I love his deck was based on archaeology, and I'm so happy fossils are printed. I think fossils are probably one of my favorite deck concepts in Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever. Graveyard fusion with someone's like the remains of your monster and my monster coming together to make something new. That is so cool. GX had a lot of good archetypes. We haven't talked about that. A lot of good archetypes. I just love him. And his duel against the Supreme King and his sacrifice at the end, being the first victim of super polymerization. Like, I will never forget that moment of like where his what was it? Gaia Plate, the Earth Giant, got taken to make Dark Gaia. I just remember being out of my seat, and I was just like, oh. And also, I liked how he used the fossil cards as like cars when they were in the dual sperm. They were kind of driving around on his fossil monsters. I thought that was cool. And then Johan. What else can I say about Johan? He is like the nicest. He's basically another kind of Judai. I think most people, you're either a fan of Judai, you're a fan of Johan, or you're a fan of both. But I like both. I like Johan more. I love Crystal Beasts. They're one of my also favorite decks. I think that Johan's story with him wanting just, his cards chose him. How often do we see a duelist get chosen by their cards? Not very often. That's a very rare storyline to have, and I like the fact that Pegasus made them from the real stones, and him building up to Rainbow Dragon, his connection with the spirits, finding that spirit hunter even, and just the fact he was such a good sport throughout all the stuff that happened to him, right? Like, he was surprisingly, like, handled it pretty well, in the way that Judai kind of, well, he went through a lot more trauma. But yeah, and I could go about hundreds of characters, but those are probably the three that I would say stick with me the most. Though I also do love characters like Manjome. Of course, I like Manjome a lot too. But those are probably the three I'd pick.
Yeah, no, love that. Yeah, three favorites. I mean, for me, it's very easy. It's the trifecta of Judai, Johan, and Yubel. Probably not in that order. It's probably Judai, Yubel, Johan. But I think those three characters are three of the strongest in the show. I love those three characters. I mean, Judai's one of my favorite he's probably my second favorite protagonist behind Yusei, who, we'll get to him in 5Ds in a few episodes. But yeah, I love him. I loved Johan and the dynamic that he had with Judai, and then you throw Yubel into the mix, and I thought the three of them just were so compelling storyline wise. And yeah, those are my three favorite. JC, would love to know your three.
Yeah, for me, definitely, obviously Judai number one. I mean, he's the reason why even people who don't love GX, people who still watch GX because of Jaden. So, Jaden, obviously my number one favorite. Then, yes, it would have to be Yubel as second place. And then I would put in third place Manjome. I actually really love Chaz, the Chaz Manjome Thunder. I love his character. Like I said, I already talked about it earlier. I love his story. I love his development. I think he's a very underrated character, an underrated rival. And I definitely think he deserved more. The writer should have done more with him past like season, 1. They brought him back kind of, he did some stuff in season 2. And then obviously in season 3, he kind of, wrapped up his story. They did a good job with it. He actually was able to defeat Edo, which was really cool to see. And I just all that was good, but I would have liked to see more of him in the middle sections in season 3. But obviously he got killed off, so we couldn't see much of that. But it would have been nice to see him play a role in there, maybe get a duel while he was in the other dimension, and maybe start actually bodying a couple of these dark members before he got kind of kidnapped and his soul got taken, for the super poly and all that stuff. I wish they would have done more with him there. But yeah, I think Manjome is just a great character. I think he's awesome. He's definitely not. He has a big fan base for sure, like who love his goofiness and this and that. But he doesn't get a lot of hate because he's not the traditional, kind of badass rival who, doesn't win. Like I hate the argument that oh, Chaz never gets to win. Yeah, neither does Kaiba, but you all love Kaiba. So what are you talking about? Kaiba never gets the win, and you all still love him and consider him one of the greatest rivals of all time. So I don't really get the argument there. I think it's kind of a lame argument. Kaiba always loses.
So to
anyway,
take it back off real quick.
So yeah, Manjome's great. I like his story. I just wish they would have done more with him. I wish they would have given him a legitimate win against Judai in season 1 when they had their rematch duel. When he came back with the Armed Dragons, he could have won there. That would have been fine. He could have won maybe in season 4 or somewhere in season 2 too. I feel like it was definitely, he was worthy of getting a win here or there. But just the way they wrote a lot of the characters in GX was kind of a flop. Another one is like Zane. I have a mixed relationship with him because I actually like he's like my second least favorite rival because I just don't like him as a person. I think he's a terrible person. But I love watching him duel. I love watching him duel because he's just so aggressive, especially when he came back as Hell Kaiser, and he's just bodying everybody, and he's just smiling about it, and just like loves like just completely defeating everybody in his path and doesn't care. And so like I have that love-hate relationship. I love watching him duel, but I also hate him as a person. But yeah, so those are like I guess my top 4, I suppose. Yeah.
Just to piggyback, because you talked about Hell Kaiser and Manjome real quick. I feel like there's a debate in the Yu-Gi-Oh fandom that like some people tried to say that Manjome is not the rival of GX, and I'm like,
he definitely
is. People try to say it's Edo, and I'm like, Judai has multiple rivals, but the main rival is Manjome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like the same. I've seen some people argue like, when we talk about Arc 5, this will happen. People trying to say Reiji's not the rival, and it should be Shingo, and I'm like, or Shun. I've seen people say Shun is the rival. I'm like, what? He told you once. It's, like, I don't think there's a problem of a main character having multiple different people considered rivals. Yeah, but obviously Manjome is the main one. I mean, the merch supports it. So does Duel Links. Like, he's the one. Like, but again, I also love Hell Kaiser. One of my best friends loves Hell Kaiser. Oh, if I was saying my 4th, it'd be Yubel be my 4th, by the way. If we were adding 4s in here. So Dylan, do you have a 4th? Because we all kind of said 4. Do you have a 4th?
You know, I just off the top of my head, I want to pick one that's not that has not been said yet and would be a top 10 character. I don't know if he'd be number 4. I loved O'Brien, and I loved his personality and just the determination that he had. Thought it was such an intriguing like arc that he had, a mini arc in season 3. Remember, he was the one that snapped like Judai back. And a lot of people don't like remember that, but like it's like he was the one who, you know, took that whatever that gem was, I don't remember,
the
like
Eye of Ucha?
Orichalcum. Was it Orichalcum?
Yeah,
it was Orichalcum.
Thank you. The Eye of Orichalcum. I know, so close to Orichalcos. So I was like, wait, is that the? But it's not.
It's very
Orichalcum.
similar. Yeah.
Very similar. And yeah, he was like, I loved that like brave moment because he was always this brave character, and then you see him even get shaken up and like. Let's be honest, like a lot of times like crazy stuff happens and nobody really has like a scared reaction to it per se, but like I loved the vulnerability that his character went through, like when Judai became the Supreme King. Like I think anybody would be like scared like crapless in that situation, and it was very relatable. And for him to take that step forward in the duel, to nick a draw off of Supreme King Hao, and then to eventually, you know, have that really, really touching moment in season 4. I don't know if touching's the right word. Chilling. I loved his character. I thought he was a cool. very cool character. Cool. Yeah.
I like Jim too. I thought he was a fun character. I thought he was cool. I like Jim as well as a character and as a person, and I liked his deck too.
Yeah, no, so great stuff, guys. Yeah, listen, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, it's one of those, I feel like you really, really love it, or maybe it wasn't for you. I feel like it's kind of just one of those shows, just based on what a lot of people have said, but there are certainly a lot of things it did right, and there's certainly a lot of really interesting routes that it went down. So, listen, I would love to know if you guys have any kind of final thoughts here when it comes to GX. JC, you're the guest. We'll start with you, and then we can swing it to Rarity. Just in conclusion, any last things you want to say?
Yeah. I guess to wrap it up, yeah, I just really love GX. Like, I am the type of person where, like, I see the arguments people make about GX being not well written, and I agree with those reasons. It's very clear early on they didn't have like a vision of where they wanted the story to go, so there was a lot of slice of life and fun stuff, which is why I love it. But it's clear they didn't have a vision, and in season 3 they did have a vision, and then that continued off in season 4, and obviously that's why the richest storytelling is in season 3 and season 4, because they had a goal, and a goal from the beginning to the end of that, and it was really, well done. Obviously there's always things we could fix, but I just think GX is so special. It's so special to me, and I feel like it's so hard, like, for me to put it low on my favorite list, because on my favorite rankings of the Yu-Gi-Ohs, because despite all of its flaws, I just love it so much. I just love the show. I love the characters. I love the stories, even the wacky stories that it tells. I just really love it. So even though, maybe objectively it might deserve to be lower or in the middle somewhere of the highest Yu-Gi-Ohs, like it's still probably number like 2 or probably second place for me, because I just love the show so much, and obviously, I'm here because of the show. So like I can't like turn my back on GX because it's the reason why I'm here today. So it's super emotional for me. I love the show. I acknowledge it's not a perfect show, and I agree with a lot of the reasonings as to why it's not perfect. But I love it, flaws and all. And you don't have to have a perfect person to love somebody. So it's kind of the same with GX. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you can still love it. And I love GX so much.
Absolutely, man. Very well said. Rarity, your final thoughts here on the first spin-off anime, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
I'm just gonna say, JC, I feel like I'm probably gonna repeat your speech when we get to Arc 5, because that's how I feel about Arc 5. Just you speaking through me early a few months around October or November-ish. But Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, again, is very much I think all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows are unique, but GX feels like in a league of its own with its unique elements. And it's always a show that I have fun revisiting. It may not be like on my hierarchy of shows that I hyperfixate on or anything, but Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is always a good time. It has great characters, has cool decks. We'll talk a lot about the dub next week, or next month, as well, about the dub too, which I have a very special connection to the dub, so that's going to be fun when we get to that. But I think Yu-Gi-Oh! GX as a story about growing up, a story about your relationships with people and how you change, and just the whole school setting. Again, I feel like every single one of us has imagined what dorm we would be in, right? Us imagine us going to Dual Academy. Oh, yeah. I feel like everyone has, like every single person. And if a show can make a viewer feel like they could be a part of the world or want to be a part of that world, and with these cool characters, I think the show succeeds. And its tributes to Duel Monsters, I think, are very tasteful. I think its inclusion of those characters when they do come in, I think, are great. I wish there was more Mokuba. It's his last cameo. He doesn't even talk. I'm not I got to mention him on this podcast until future reference, until Duel Links probably. We'll get to that probably. But yeah, GX, really good ride. And again, the people who adore GX and are still making content about it to this day, I see you. I appreciate you. And it's just a fun ride. And yeah. And also, long live dinosaurs and fossils. 10 out of 10. We love our fossil dino duelists over here. Dino DNA! I'll talk more about that next week.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah, listen, GX is one of those shows that I think has a special place in a lot of people's hearts. I mean, for me, it will always be the first, subbed anime that I ever watched. And I think that's really, really cool. So, whether you hate it or love it, I feel like it's just one of those shows that is very fun to talk about and will always be a fun show to talk about. So I want to thank Rarity and JC. This is the longest episode of the podcast, which we were expecting because we had a guest on. JC coming on, being our guest for the GX anime episode. We really appreciate it. Again, he runs the YouTube channel, Legendary Duels. I'm going to link all of his stuff down below. Please check out his channel. I know he'll appreciate it. I know it means a lot to him. And Rarity, huge thank you as well for joining me. Is there anything that you want to promote, Rarity, that you've been working on kind of recently?
Real quick, and then we'll let JC do some promotion.
Yep.
So I know I feel like I keep saying this every single time we're on the podcast, guys, but I swear, we're getting really, really close to the Arc 5 project teaser. We should have all the elements done by the end of this month, so hopefully early March release for that teaser video. Still working on recording for the Yuri Duel stuff. It's a lot of different stuff we're doing. We have people, this year's been kind of tough start for mostly everybody, so it happens. But I'm still appreciative to get to be here with y'all. And also, if you want to see me do funny meme videos about Go Rush, follow me on Twitter. I've been having fun just talking about Go Rush over there as it's been airing. So if you want to get some memes or talk about that, I also do that over there because it's a lot less response ever than making full-form YouTube videos. Plus, the copyright bots are not as atrocious over there. So feel free to follow me over there. and stuff is cooking, and I'm excited next month to talk about the GX dub, which is going to be such a fun ride. I'm gonna have such a fun job making that thumbnail. I got a thought of all the funny pictures. If y'all have funny pictures or moments from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX you think should be in the thumbnail, tag me on Twitter or just comment in the comments. I will gladly take suggestions to make that thumbnail as funny and as memey as possible for next month. But thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, JC, for being our first guest. You were awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
JC,
you.
anything you want to promote, man? I know Legendary Duels. I mean, if you want to talk about it, you can.
Yeah, man, of course. Legendary Duels, that's my main channel. Go to the link in the description on the video. He'll have me there. I'm going back to doing just character deck profiles and duels strictly on that. I started a second channel called Legendary Lancers, where I'm going to be doing from now on all my Duel Links content, Master Duel content, as well as new ideas. I'm going to be doing a podcast soon as well. I want to have more discussion videos on that channel, so this is kind of cool that I'm finally doing a discussion video with other, fans of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like Dylan and Rarity. So this is exactly what I want. I want to talk about my love and passion for Yu-Gi-Oh! More, and I'm going to be doing that on the second channel more. I haven't uploaded any. I did some reaction videos that you guys could watch that, where I give some thoughts on GX and some other stuff there as well. And I want to have more of those, so just be patient. I'm working on getting a new job. So that way I have a better schedule and I'll have more time to maybe do more videos and discussions. But it's been rough kind of getting content out there because of my rough work schedule. But once that gets resolved, I will be able to hopefully do a little bit more here and there. So I'll do more discussion videos, Master Duel, Duel Links, live streams and stuff like that on the second channel, Legendary Lancers. That'll be in the description. I'll send it to Dylan so he can put it there. And then for my third channel, which is my Pokemon channel called Ice Master Gleason, I've been doing Pokemon content. I've been playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, and I've been doing some content for TCG Pocket there and live streams on that channel as well. So if you guys want to hop in, if you guys like Pokemon and want to check it out, by all means come in, subscribe, and just have some fun with me as I make some cool content on that, doing some battles and creating deck profiles, like character deck profiles. Like I build Ash's team in Pocket and stuff like that, and Rivals and stuff like the same thing I do on my main channel. And also I'll be doing creating Pokemon decks for Yu-Gi-Oh characters on there as well. So I always like to mix the two together because I love Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh so much. Yu-Gi-Oh being number one, Pokemon being number two. But yeah, those are all my, I'll give him the link for that as well, but those are all my connections if you guys want to see more of my stuff. But thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it so much. It was a lot of fun talking about GX. It was great. It was a fun time just going back and talking about what brought me here, what brought me back, and my love for the show. So thank you guys for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. JC, thank you so much for coming on. Rarity, thank you for always being on, part of the podcast. Always appreciated. To all of you guys watching, if you're still watching at this point, that's freaking amazing. Let us know all your thoughts on Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Very, very excited to talk to you down below in the comments. This has been episode 8 of the Appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast on the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime. Thank you, Rarity. Thank you, JC. And thank you all for watching from home. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.
See
Take
you guys.
care, guys.
Take care.